there's all these signs when you head into Mexico. Weapons not allowed, guns not allowed. Sure, they're not allowed. I'm sure they're not, actually, but there's an enormous smuggling operation. There are all sorts of warning signs about migrants in the border. In fact, in this beautiful park here at the picnic areas, there's warnings to be careful about migrants. Oh, hi, as you can tell by these prickly bushes behind me, I am not in snowy Canada. I have zipped down to the state of Arizona just for a day. In fact, not even a day. I woke up 21 hours ago in Toronto, got on a plane, made my way to a town called Sierra Vista, Arizona, where I was interviewing Betty Carbert. She's the mother of Chris Carbert, one of the 4 accused Coots 4 defendants from the blockade that the truckers had there 2 years ago. We'll have a special show about that. That's not for today, but since Tucson, Arizona is just, 20 miles away from the border between Arizona and Mexico, we decided to use the rest of our day here to go and look around at the border mess that has seen hundreds of thousands, in fact, I think it's in the millions of illegal migrants just waltz across the border. You may know that my colleagues Lincoln Jay and Alexa Lavoie did some excellent reporting on the subject from Texas earlier this year. We take a look at that.
We met with a retired Border Patrol agent named Louis and his nephew, Ethan, who agreed to show us a popular spot for people to enter into Eagle Pass, Texas, illegally from Mexico. This was just miles down the road from Shelby Park.
So at one time, I don't know, well, you guys have researched all this stuff. We had Title 42.
Yeah.
It was a COVID measure.
Yeah.
So that when people came across, we just kicked it back to Mexico. So Title 42, when they did away with it, the hordes of people came across. Every morning, 700 would walk up this road. 700 aliens early morning, every morning.
Well, Lincoln and Alexa had a few days on the ground. They made local contacts, and they really spent a lot of time at the border, and wouldn't you know it, they actually encountered some illegal migrants emerging from the bushes. Here's a reminder of how that looked.
Lo siento. ¿Cuáles son tu país?
México.
México. Ecuador. Ecuador. ¿Tu familia?
Sí.
¿Sí? ¿Cómo tú cruzar aquí?
Solo caminando.
Well, I simply didn't have the time. I had about 4 hours of daylight, and I didn't want to go out looking for migrants at night because, of course, the people who smuggle them are sometimes desperate and criminal. So I had about 4 hours of daylight. And what I want to show you today is what I saw during those 4 hours. The answer is, I didn't actually see any people sneaking across the border. I saw a lot of border police. And I want to tell you one anecdote before I throw to some video clips that I recorded earlier today. We actually saw dozens of Border Patrol police vehicles all around wherever we went. And there was even some sort of migrant check stops on the highway. We saw one as we were driving down there, but we didn't stop and look at it. But on our way back to our hotel tonight, we saw one of these migrant police check stops at the side of the highway. We slowed down the vehicle so we could film this migrant check stop that was closed for the night. So we were driving on the highway and we slowed down to about, 50 kilometers an hour just so we could film this migrant check stop. And then we sped back up. Wouldn't you know it, there were still so many border agents all around that when they saw our vehicles slow down to take a look at the border migrant check stop, they assumed we were smugglers or something. And they put on their flashers and they pulled us over and we showed them who we were and they let us go. It's an enormous border. And the difference between America and Mexico couldn't be more stark in terms of economic opportunity and freedom and, frankly, crime. Despite the fact that there's an enormous deployment of troops, the migrants are still coming, and when they are captured by these Border Patrol agents, they're not just deported. Like Justin Trudeau, he lets them stay in the country, Joe Biden. Anyways, without further ado, let me show you some clips that we assembled from my day today. I don't think it was as successful as Lincoln and Alexa's trip to Texas because they were there for many days and there was an enormous migration pouring over the border. We actually couldn't get close to the border. All the roads were closed. You could not get right up to that border fence. But I think it was sort of an interesting journey anyways. And I'd like to show it to you because we did spend the rest of our day on it. So for better or for worse, here's how my day went. As you can see, I am not in Canada anymore. I'm in Naco, Mexico. Through that fence, 20 feet, is Naco, Arizona, and you can see the border fence stretching for miles, actually all the way to the horizon. Down here, the fence has been painted in a beautiful, attempt to make it a less ugly barrier than it really is, rusted steel. But down there, it's near the children's park. It was interesting crossing from the American side to the Mexican side. They didn't ask for any ID. They didn't ask for any passports. They literally didn't say anything to us. Well, they said a few things in Spanish that I didn't understand. They did look in the car to see if we were smuggling contraband from America into Mexico, and they let us go. And immediately you can see the obvious. Above us, you can hear a drone, whether it's a police drone or a military drone or a drone of coyotes who are planning to smuggle people across the border, because the county on that side of the fence is where an enormous number of migrants cross over. And in fact, all the way down from Sierra Vista to the border, we saw police vehicles, border patrol vehicles. I'm told that there's often a blimp in the air. So we are in a place where an enormous number of people are smuggled into the U.S. side. I'm slightly alert because although it is bright out and we are, a few hundred yards from a large police presence, I also know that there's a lot of lawlessness there. Not only do the smugglers bring people over, but they bring, of course, drugs over. Well, it's 5 minutes later, and we're now on the U.S. side of this border wall. You can see the U.S. Customs and Immigration headquarters, sort of in that adobe style. This town on the Arizona side, the American side of the border, has the exact same name, Naco, and it's a little bit run down. It's an unincorporated village, but it's markedly different in every way from the Mexican side. Enormous security here. I mentioned before we had a drone overhead, and we asked the border guard what he thought it was. He thought it probably was American Border Patrol. There's all sorts of sensors when you come across, all sorts of inspections, investigations. You have all this, but in a way, it's just for show. Because when people, and I shouldn't just say Mexicans, because I don't even know if Mexicans would be a majority of them anymore. Anyone from South and Central America, but really everyone from around the world knows if you can make your way to Mexico, you can just march right in, and you want to be caught because you're not going to be kicked out. You'll be, in New York City, you'll be given a lovely place to live. You'll be put up in a hotel. Now, the mayor there wants to give every migrant $10,000. By the way, in a lot of the countries where people come from, $10,000 US is 5 years' income. So it's an enormous magnet bringing hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And of course, these border states have sort of had it, especially Texas, which is shipping a lot of these migrants to these Democrat sanctuary cities, New York, Chicago, places like that virtue signaled about how open borders were a good thing when it was only these border towns that paid the price. But now they're squawking because their own local poor and homeless people are being pushed aside by the world's illegal immigrants. So here you can see the border wall going off to the horizon there. It does look impressive, although I know a little bit about walls. If you don't have people patrolling them, it is true. You can have a 20-foot wall, someone can get over it with a 21-foot ladder. You can have a 30-foot wall. You can always get over a fence. The fence is to delay and to detect. You need a fence system. You need patrols, and there are some patrols, but I say again, the craziest thing, and we saw police cars and we saw all sorts of infrastructure, but none of it is actually to keep the migrants out. It's to catch them and then release them, which is the strangest thing I've ever heard. What an extraordinary view behind me. This is Arizona. You can see the border barrier, the border wall between the United States and Mexico. It stretches a great distance down that way. We were at the town of Naco, Mexico, and there was a small Naco in Arizona. I didn't tell you that when we were on the Naco, so the Mexico side, we were driving around and we were filming a little bit in front of the wall. People were stopping to look at us because there's not a lot of tourists from the United States in Naco. There's not a lot to do or see there. And it didn't bother me that people were stopping and staring as we did a little bit of journalism. But one SUV without a license plate seemed to be following us, and I didn't mind much. And as we were driving this way, it followed this way, and we went that way, and it went that way. And I was focused on driving, but our videographer, Lincoln, and he saw this other car, and it was someone in an unmarked vehicle, no license plate, with a walkie-talkie.
He's following us 150%. He's on a walkie-talkie.
We didn't know who it was. Who knows? It could have been just some local person, could have been a cop, or it could have been someone with the cartel. We didn't want to take our chances, even though we were a few hundred yards away from police. We thought, let's get back to the American side, which is where we are. What's funny is there's all these signs when you head into Mexico: weapons not allowed, guns not allowed. Sure, they're not allowed. I'm sure they're not, actually, but there's an enormous smuggling operation of armed gangs, and they traffic in two main resources. One is people, and the other is fentanyl, drugs made in China, undermining the United States. This is an absolutely gorgeous area. We drove on this windy road up here. I think this is called the Montezuma Canyon Road. There's a great amount of history here. This is the Coronado National Memorial, and I'm not fluent enough with my Spanish-American history to know who Coronado was, although I am fascinated by it. It's enormous here. It's a very large territory, and it's fairly sparsely populated on the American side. As we drove from Sierra Vista down to Naco and then from Naco to here, we probably saw, I'm going to say, at least 20 Border Patrol vehicles along the road, and as well sort of depots or base camps where you might see 10 parked and 5 parked. There's towers, which I assume are some sort of observational tower. There are all sorts of warning signs about migrants in the border. In fact, in this beautiful park here at the picnic areas, there's warnings to be careful about migrants. They have a lot of people dedicated to watching the border and finding migrants, but when they find them, they release them. And I think the migrants want to be found, to be rescued. It's almost twilight. It's almost dusk here. The sun is setting, and it's getting a little bit chilly. During the day, it's very hot. At night, it's cool. It's a very difficult journey. I mean, you could see it's a desert. This is an arid place. It's not fun, I imagine, to be an illegal migrant crossing over, just making sure you have enough water alone. You want to be caught. You want to be caught and brought to a place where you can get medical attention, where you can get food and water, and where you can perhaps get a bus ticket or a plane ticket to New York City. Who wouldn't want? I mean, you saw what it looked like in Naco, and I'm not disparaging the place, but the average national income in Naco is a fraction of what it is in America. It didn't feel safe there. Maybe we just were a little bit on pins and needles because we were unused to it. But who wouldn't want to go from Naco, Mexico, into Naco, Arizona, be caught, and you're not going to be sent out? In fact, if you play your cards right, you could wind up in New York City with a $10,000 gift welcome basket from the mayor there. We haven't seen any migrants, but we've seen a great many signs telling us to be alert to migrants. Anyhow, I'll sign off from the top of the mountain here, and we'll slowly make our way back down. You know, we didn't have that moment that Lincoln and Alexa had a few months ago where, boom, jumping out of a bush was a group of migrants. It just didn't happen in the hours we had in town. But it's an enormous factor. I really have never seen this many police deployed in an area. It felt like a military operation, which I guess it sort of is. I think it's a critical issue for the United States, because if you don't have a border, are you really even a country? For Rebel News, I'm Ezra Levant.